Okay, prevalence of PTSD. Alright, what we're looking at here is why are some people more likely to develop PTSD than others? And again, we've got heaps of content here, but it's all interconnected. So we're looking at males and females, racial and social differences, and then developmental influences. These two here are essentially both looking at socioeconomic status, or I mean poverty for want of a better word, but we're looking at the connection there. Alright, gender differences. Okay, so again, just reviewing cognitive models, prolonged stress, and because I think going over these again and again is there's no harm in that in the beginning, reinforce it. And now we're looking at gender, race, socioeconomic status, and upbringing, so other possible factors. This is our question. I think it might be a little bit more straightforward than what I had in the textbook, but this is, as much as possible, keep it simple. Right? Why are females more likely to develop PTSD than males? This is a very common finding in the literature. Game of Jeopardy, to recap the unit so far. Yeah, so you can just play that. Again, I've given this a tip in other packs, but what I like to do here is get them in groups of 3 around one laptop per 3, and they play it in a small group of 3. If I'm the host in front of the class, the kids don't get enough questions, enough reps, and it's they're not enough engagement, but them playing it works much better. Alright, and then, so from the video we watched earlier, 9 minutes to 18 minutes, this reviews what's going on in here in the brain during stress, and also, but it shows how it can be applied to real life, and so they look at training in Marines and how that can, how training the brain can help them in those situations. Okay, hypotheses. So after a traumatic event, who do they think are more likely to develop PTSD? And I mean, they should remember women because that was the question in the very beginning of the slideshow. But they hopefully can be able to think about why that might be. Okay. All right. Now, just before we get into this lesson, I think it's good to give them some context about Israel and Palestine, the conflict, the Second Intifada. This is where the study for today's lesson took place. So they need to learn a little bit about this. This gives them an idea of some of the casualties. And we see lots of civilians killed. There were lots of terrorist attacks on both sides. And this is a little video. There are some very, very explicit videos of the explosions and what happened. I don't show them in class. I think they're too gruesome, too graphic, and I've got a pretty strong stomach for that stuff. I'm pretty rough, but you know, you can find them. This is a bit more gentle. Just explains more personal experience of trauma based on that. Okay, so summarizing gender and PTSD. Why do we think these differences exist? And then these are the factors that we're looking at. And you can see these are all related to cognition. So we're not looking at biological differences, but we're looking at cognitive differences, the way they're thinking about themselves and the trauma and the events themselves. So let me get into the definitions. So self-efficacy and why that might be linked, and then the idea of sense of threat. So how these factors here might link to symptoms of PTSD, or why they might end up being more likely to develop PTSD. And again, this is all explained in the textbook, so yeah, I don't always want to go over it here. So yeah, because it's all written there. What I've given here, this is an extract from the workbook, and so here are the terms that students use to put in their response, and they have to have all those terms, and they answer that question in the space below. So this is a bit of scaffolding that I've found, can work quite well to make sure students have really clear answers using the appropriate terminology. Alright, and so if they can answer that question using those terms, they should be spot on. And then this is what can I do to help. This is them reflecting on, how could they maybe apply what they've learned to make the world a better place in some way. Again, you might want to skip it if you don't want to do that. Okay, then we get into race and socioeconomic status.